Hi, this is Corey Johnston, and today's lesson is going to take place in the 5th chapter of the book of Ephesians. We're going to try and make it at least all the way up to the 20th verse. We may take it all the way to the end, time pending, but Ephesus, the city to whom this epistle was directed, the assembly of that city, was a city of some significance. It had a population, approximate population of 500,000 people. It was the 4th largest urban metropolis in the Roman Empire during its heyday, and it was located in the province of Asia Minor, which corresponds to the modern country of Turkey, but it would have been founded by people of Grecian stock, so it was on the west tail end of across the Aegean between it and Greece. And it was the host of a lot of pastoral superstars. John, the beloved John, the disciple and apostle, was his pastoral ministry was there, as was Timothy's, who was the recipient of 2 of Paul's pastoral epistles, and also Paul himself. He had personally evangelize this city, and a lot of people have the picture in their mind that Paul was a man constantly on the move, moving from one location to the next without pausing to rest, but he actually spent a period of some 2 to 3 years in this city, during which time he encountered fierce opposition and landed himself in prison. So it is not implausible that this, which along with Colossians, Philippians, and Philemon are classified as prison epistles, this one might have been the earliest written one of them. It may have been written from the one in Ephesus as opposed to the one in Rome, where nearly all the others would be. That would have placed the dating of this around 56 A.D., whereas the his original bout in a Roman prison would have taken place in 62 A.D., but the time frame we feel is personally irrelevant because its message does not alter, and its present application does not alter, and no matter when it was written, it is alive and present in every generation since. And it's a lot of his best work came from prisons, and there wasn't a whole lot of internal deficiencies to address in the Ephesian assembly. He certainly endured persecution, and they probably suffered along with them. So this isn't a critical epistle, and like a lot of his prison epistles, it's structured in a systematic format. So the first 3 chapters pertain to doctrine, and the final 3 pertain to how to utilize in the practical application of that doctrine. So in the preceding chapter, the 4th chapter, I've done one lesson on each half, the first 16 verses, followed by the title, A Call for Unity, and I've done the 17 through 32 on that. But he explores on the sources of their unity in the church, and really gives them moral principles and guidelines too in the second half. But we're going to open with the opening verse of the 5th chapter, which reads, "Become then imitators of Elohim, as beloved children." So before them and above them, they have their perfect model, their moral role model, and their source and guidance and their perfect example is above them and before them at all times, and they are to imitate him inasmuch being adopted to his family gives us the access to him, whereby we will have the proximity of exposure to imitate him inasmuch as a child is inclined to imitate their parents, because that is the closest role model they have to them, and the raising of family is going to form the juxt of the 21st through 29th verses of this chapter, or at least the roles and relations in that. We don't know if we're going to have enough time to delve on that today, and walk in love as Messiah also has loved us and gave himself for us, a gift and an offering to Yahweh for a sweet-smelling fragrance. So the Messiah's loved, who loved us perfectly all the way to the point of self-sacrifice in the cross, in the greatest expression of love one can give oneself is the willingness to lay down their life for the friend, as the Master himself said, and is recorded as saying in John 15:13, and he proved that he practiced what he preached when he took himself to the cross, which was the greatest expression of love for humanity from divinity, and that was a gift, that was an offering. He was a self-sacrifice, so he was an offering to Yahweh. He did it at his behest and on his behalf for his redemptive plan, and it was received as a sweet-smelling fragrance. And of course, Yahweh is not a bodily creature and does not have a literal nose, but we anthropomorphize him using language that is familiar to better understand and approach that which is unfamiliar. But whoring in all uncleanness, or greed of gain, let it not even be named among you, as is proper among saints. So with being saints, we are expected to embody a certain ethos and spirit and morality, which shuns sexual sin or impurity of any variety, and any greed of gain. You can serve God or you can serve mammon. It's seriously that simple. And our possessions can take a hold of us, so much so that they possess us. So the things we think we own really own us, and that squeezes out the room for the love of the Father, which should be preeminent in our hearts. And now reputation isn't everything, because even if we live, these exalted standards in our life, they can still smear us. But we shouldn't. We should live in such a way that were they to lie about it, it would gain no credibility amongst their audiences. Neither filthiness, nor foolish talking, nor coarse jesting, which are not fitting, but rather thanksgiving. So rather than be involved in unclean talk with dirty jokes, foolish talking that can be gossip, which is the refuge of fools and not of intelligent people, to be clean in language, don't even joke about in unbecoming or unbefitting manner of the saint, but always and only be giving thanks for everything that is in front of you to the one who is above you and around you and in you. For this you know, that no one who whores, nor unclean ones, nor one greedy of gain, who is an idolater, has any inheritance in the kingdom of Messiah and Yahweh. So the kingdom is their mutual possession, it's their dual property. They hold the keys, and they are the guardians of the gate. And the way we gain access to that is to avoid sexual sin, and to avoid the greed of gain, which is likened to idolatry, in that it has the potential to at least displace Yahweh in the center of our hearts. And the other restrictions for the outlines that Paul writes of that I can think of at this present moment in time is in 1 Corinthians 6, 9, and 10, wherein that list includes the effeminate and the homosexual, among others. Let no one deceive you with empty words, for because of these the wrath of Yahweh comes upon the sons of disobedience. So empty words have a deceptive potential. People like hearing what they want to hear above what they really need to know. There's comfort in the lies, which make people prone and susceptible to deception and flattery. But for those who spread those words and that deception are reserved for the wrath of Yahweh, as sons of disobedience by right ought to be. And we run the risk of sharing in their fate if we take seriously what they have to say. Therefore, do not become partakers with them. That's a self-evident statement at this point. Do not collaborate, do not condone, do not accept, do not tolerate what they do or who they are, at least in the presence of the saints. For you were once darkness, but now light in the Master. Walk as children of light. So we were once so enmeshed in darkness that he just says flat out darkness. That was our former state of sin from which we were rescued in. And I think somewhere in the early second chapter of this book, he describes us as being completely and totally lost in darkness in our former pre-regenerate life. So most Christians, there's maybe two categories: those who inherited the faith and those who were sinners who came to an awakening that led them to the cross and the light and have walked accordingly as such. So as children of the light, light in its divine personification is none other than Yahshua the Messiah, and we are to imitate him as beloved children, which brings us back to the opening verse in this passage. For the fruit of the Spirit is in all goodness and righteousness and truth. The fruit of the Spirit, the most extensive list he leaves us with, is in Galatians 5. He speaks of 9 virtues or fruit of the Spirit. Here the list is a little more narrow. It's goodness, righteousness, and truth. But these are every bit in their own way as equally worthy of cultivation as any of the more extensive items as outlined in the 5th chapter of Galatians, 22nd through 23rd verses. Proving what is well-pleasing to the Master, and have no fellowship with the fruitless works of darkness, but rather reprove them. That's more familiarly translated as exposed, but the idea is to not only not have nothing to do with those who are of the world and in its sin and in its darkness, is to keep ourselves separate from them, at least from their contaminating influence, and should they arise or infiltrate in any of our assemblies or flocks, we must expose them or reprove them, because people need to know who they are and what they do. They are liars and deceivers who subvert the good harmony which exists in the pure and pristine assembly and turns it into a worldly ladder of competition for influence. That's their main motive, to subvert the apostolic authority with their own agendas and designs. For it is a shame even to speak of what is done by them in secret. So depraved and unspeakably immoral as these, that it is not even pleasant to discuss that what they do behind closed doors. And why should it be? The thought of these deeds ought to be revolting in the sight of every saint who submitted to the light and walks accordingly in it, and is guided by it and directed by it, and eventually lands his eternal destination through constant vigilance in seeing it and making the most of it. That is why he says, "Wake up, you who sleep, and arise from the dead, and Messiah shall shine on you." But all being reproved are manifested by the light, for whatever is manifested is light. So light, in contrast to sin and darkness, has no need to conceal itself or cloak itself in secrecy or surround itself with deception. It is light. It is there to see. It is there to behold. It is not afraid of it, who it is, which is truth. But those who say one thing but mean another, and their actions are inconsistent with their words, they must be exposed for who they are and what they are trying to do before they actually do what they came to do. That is why he says, "Wake up, you who sleep, and arise from the dead, and Messiah shall shine on you." So sleeping in the contemporary lexicon was likened to death. Sleep, it's been said, is the cousin of death. And even though there's nothing permanent about sleep, it is a time of rejuvenation and rest, which is we are not completely doormat for as long as we will be if we are dead and do not receive our resurrected bodies in perfect form, which are promised to us and await us as long as we follow the light. And if the light is shining on you, that means we must be a city on a hill which cannot be hid. Our lights and our goodness exist for the world. So even though we have to keep ourselves separate from them, we must not lose concern for their welfare, but to rather provide them a positive example that they can reach out to and grasp. And we're actually going to cut it short in the interest of maybe doing this chapter in 2 segments of equal length. So that's all the time we have for today. I'm glad you're here. Stay tuned till next time. I'll see you then. Bye-bye.